Hey guys, welcome to Crater Mania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater. And I'd like to welcome all of you back to my series here on YouTube, 500 Movies in 2025. And for this episode, this will be numbers 186 through 189. Wait, I'm sorry. Back up. 180 through 185, my bad. So 186 through 189 will be this Saturday's show. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, we're getting close to the 200 movie mark here on the 500 movies in 2025. And I mean, so we're just rolling right along. But before we get into tonight's episode, um, just wanted to talk about a few things. So I was supposed to have done this show on the Predator franchise um, last night, but something happened yesterday with me. Like I had to take off work early, and I just got really, really sick, and this was like I was just felt so drained, so tired. Like my head was hurting, my whole body was hurting. So I don't know what was going on with me, but I got some good rest last night and woke up this morning and I was feeling a lot better. And I was like, damn, I didn't get to do the stream last night, but I said I'm gonna do it tonight, and because I'm really excited to talk about the movies tonight. Because if you watched my Alien Day show this past Saturday, where I talked about the Alien movies, the first and the second one, and also the prequels, um, then more than likely you're going to enjoy this show as well, because I'm talking about another franchise that kind of plays into the whole world of Alien because they did have a crossover with one another, and it's the Predator franchise. And I'm actually going to be talking about those Alien versus Predator movies tonight as well. That'll be at the end of this show because I said, if I watch the Alien movies and I watch the Predator movies, I mean, I can't, not watch the Alien versus Predator movies. Even though I don't really care that much for the second Alien versus Predator, um, I still, just I wanted to talk about it with you guys, tell you how I felt. But I do like the first one. But I don't want to get into that too much right now, because I want to save that for later. But aside from all that, some more stuff coming up. So like, as you guys may know, I go to horror conventions a lot too. I love doing that. And the last one I went to was at Horror Hound Wicked in Cincinnati. And I'm actually going to another one that I go to yearly, and this will be the fourth year for this convention. I believe I've been to every single one of them so far. It's in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's next Saturday, May the 10th, that I'm going to be attending, and that's FrankenCon. FrankenCon, like I said, is a newer convention. This will be its fourth year. But it's very old school. If you were going to the conventions, years ago, like 15, 20 years ago, and if you remember how the atmosphere at those conventions were, and just how it's so chill and so relaxed, um, that's how this one is. It's a much smaller convention, and I really, really just love the atmosphere of it. The guys that run the show are really good dudes. I'm pretty good friends with those. I don't talk to them as much as I would like to. Just you know, and just they live all the way over there close to Knoxville, Tennessee. So really excited to see those guys, though. They're super cool. Corey and Richard and Matt, and just yeah, really cool show. You guys should check it out if you've never been. If it's local to you, or if it's a couple hours drive. Like it's a couple hours away from me, but I just love attending this show. They get some really neat, like cult like guests. Like this year, they're going to be having Joe Bob Briggs again and Darcy. Rhonda Shear's also going to be there from Up All Night. They're having a Cujo reunion with Dee Wallace and Danny Pintaro. Michael Berryman's that's going to be there, so kind of a little mini Hills Have Eyes reunion between Dee Wallace and Michael Berryman. Um, I know Brian Bremer is going to be there again this year. He's there like every year, though. He played Bunt and Pumpkinhead. He was also in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. Uh, I know there's a few more I'm forgetting about. Oh, Kelly Maroney from Night of the Comet and Chopping Mall and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But yeah, just go to frankencontn.com. And if I'll put that in the chat here for you guys. That so let's see, frankencontn.com. Well, if I can spell right. So there you guys go. If you want to check out their website, see who all is going to be there, all the different events that they got going down, you definitely go and check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, that's next Saturday, May the 10th. And so the following Monday after FrankenCon, we'll be traveling again, going to Louisville, Kentucky, to the KFC Yum Center. And for that, I'm going to be at WWE Monday Night Raw. So this is the first Raw I've been to since December of 2010, right after me and Candace first started dating. We got tickets for this because my nephew Henley, he has over the past year become a huge wrestling fan, especially a huge WWE fan. So this will be his first ever Monday Night Raw. This will be his first ever wrestling event. Period. So he's super excited. We're getting prepared for it. I think we're going to make a few signs. We got some pretty good seats. So yeah, super excited to see who else is going to be there, what's going to go down. So it's going to be a really fun time. But so aside from all that, I guess it's time to go ahead and jump into the show and just talk about these Predator movies. And this first one I'm so excited to talk about because this is probably my favorite Predator movie of the entire franchise, and it is the original film from 1987. Because look, there are 80s action movies, and there is Predator. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, this film isn't just a classic; it's practically perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's a masterpiece. It takes a group of the most like capable alpha male, commandos imaginable, and just puts them up against something that they cannot understand. They can't understand it, they can't fight it, or they can't even see it. You know what I mean? Just it just kind of systematically stripping away their advantages until it's just like raw survival. And I think that is what makes this movie utterly brilliant. From that moment that Dutch, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, in his absolute prime, just radiating effortless, authority in this film, and just his team, they parachute into that kind of dense, oppressive Central American jungle. You're in for something special. And the team itself is legendary in this film. Each member is a distinct like kind of archetype to them, brought to life by this kind of incredible cast. You have Dutch, who is played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then you have this government tied guy that's named Dylan, that's played by Carl Weathers. Rest in peace. Um, and then you have like this very silent, intense Mac, played by Bill Duke, who was also in Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then you have Blaine, who is this muscle bound kind of truth telling guy, played by Jesse the Body Ventura. And of course, Jesse Body Ventura was also a wrestler as well. So that adds another reason for me to love this film. And just his character is unforgettable. With that minigun that he has and all that. So and then Sonny Landham, who plays the tracker Billy. just everybody, in this, Poncho and just, I forget the other guy's name that's played by Shane Black, but yeah, just everybody in that whole outfit is just they're like peak '80s action heroes, and they're confident, they're lethal, just dripping with testosterone. Like I mean that though that whole scene with the handshake scene between Dylan and Dutch, where like they uh just grip each other like almost like a arm wrestling sequence, like Dylan, you son of a bitch. So I mean, it's just classic stuff like that. It's really cheesy, but it's super fun. Um, and the setup to this is just pure efficient storytelling. Um, just it's a simple rescue mission gone horribly wrong. But, the genius of the film is how it pivots. It starts as this kind of standard military action film, showcasing the team's formidable like skills as they're effortlessly just they take down this guerrilla camp. You see their proficiency in this, their teamwork, their sheer power and all of it. And then the movie pulls the rug out from underneath you. Um, so these strange things start happening. Bodies are found gruesomely mutilated, skinned, and hung from these trees. Um, and what was, a clear enemy becomes something else, something unseen, something faster, something alien. So the film just masterfully, builds this dread, through atmosphere rather than just jump scares. Um, and the whole dense, sweaty jungle it becomes a character itself. It's very claustrophobic to the cast here, and to just the audience watching the film. It's very disorienting, hiding eyes that you can't see. Um, and the sound design is crucial to the film. Just the rustling leaves, the strange little clicks and roars from the predator, um, and just everything the sounds of the jungle. You feel the tension right along with the team in the film. And then there's the reveal, or rather the lack of a clear reveal initially. Um, the thermal vision point of view shots are groundbreaking in this and just instantly iconic. Kind of giving us glimpses of, the hunter without showing the creature itself. And this builds insane amounts of suspense. And when we finally do get see glimpses, the shimmering cloak device that the predator has, the strange tracks, the plasma shots from his shoulder, um, that fear becomes more, real. Not just to the characters on screen, but to the audience as well. And the Predator itself, which is designed by the legendary Stan Winston, who won an Oscar for this, it is simply one of the best creature designs in cinema history. And it's my absolute favorite creature design ever. Um, it's not just a monster; it's a hunter. It has rules, it has technology, the cloaking device, the plasma caster, the targeting system, the whole self-destruct system. But it also uses, primal instincts and all that. It's intelligent and patient and just ruthless aggression for real. Uh, it systematically like picks off the team, exploiting their weaknesses, um, just turning the ultimate hunters into the hunted. So the descent of these capable soldiers into this this primal survival mode is really the film's core theme. Um, and their high tech weaponry, becomes useless pretty much. Um, against this invisible enemy, it's invisible to them, and they're forced to rely on instinct and traps and mud camouflage and just and sheer willpower in this. And Arnold's whole transformation from this confident leader, to this mud covered, roaring primal survivor is really mesmerizing in a way. And it culminates in one of the most satisfying final confrontations ever filmed, in my opinion. It's a battle of wits and brute force between this man and this alien that are just stripped down to basics. Um, and every performance in this movie is solid, is absolutely solid. Every action sequence, whether it's the initial camp assault or the final cat and mouse game between Arnold and the Predator, um, it's expertly staged and easy to follow. The pacing to this is near perfect, starting fast, slowing down for tension, and then building to this kind of explosive climax. Um, and just the practical effects hold up incredibly well here. Um, they make the creature feel very tangible and terrifying, in my opinion. This movie is more than just an action movie. It's a brilliant blend of action, sci-fi, horror. It takes simple concepts, the hunter versus the hunted, man versus the unknown, and executes them flawlessly. It's quotable, like get to the chopper, and if it bleeds, we can kill it. Um, just all everything about this is it just makes it endlessly rewatchable and just plain fucking cool, man. Um, it's a film made with confidence and skill and just a clear vision, and that's why as a fan I consider it an absolute undeniable masterpiece of its genre. Um, so what else can be said about this? I mean, I I could go on about this all night. I mean, seriously. But let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes. So the director of the Predator is John McTiernan, and if you recognize that name, then John McTiernan is widely regarded as one of the most significant, action film directors of the late 1980s and the 1990s. He's known for his ability to craft these tightly plotted, suspenseful, and intelligently directed action movies that often featured strong, resourceful heroes facing these seemingly insurmountable odds in confined or clearly defined spaces. Um, he's most famous for directing a string of like highly successful and critically acclaimed, action thrillers like Predator, and which was his breakout film. This movie was his breakout film. It really established his talent for building tension and staging action in a specific environment. And then a year later, he did Die Hard, and Die Hard is considered one of the greatest action films ever made. It redefined that whole genre and solidified his reputation for masterminding these intense action movies within like a single location, like in Die Hard's case, the Nakatomi Plaza skyscraper. And other notable films that he's directed include Last Action Hero, which is my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger film of all time. And he also did Die Hard with a Vengeance from 1995. Um, and while his later career faced like legal troubles and all that, that's a whole nother story. But his earlier works, particularly like Predator and Die Hard, I think remain hugely influential pillars of that whole action genre. And he's known for his kind of clear, geography in action scenes, that strong pacing, just that ability to make these complex situations feel understandable and exciting. Um, but as far as like the legacy and the impact of Predator, I think that it's substantial to the whole action sci-fi genre and just pop culture in general too. I mean, um, there was a lot of genre blending with this film in particular, like because it was highly influential in doing that. Like the whole military action film, the sci-fi aspect of it, the horror slash slasher elements. It provided, I mean, it provided that these genres could coexist effectively, and it created something more tense and unpredictable than just a straightforward entry in any kind of single category. um, and many subsequent films have tried to emulate its formula, putting these kind of highly trained individuals against a supernatural or alien threat. But very few have been up to par as what the original Predator is. And if you look at the iconic creature design, like I mentioned earlier, Stan Winston's design for the Predator is legendary. It's instantly recognizable, and it consistently ranks among the greatest movie monsters and creatures of all time. The design itself, combining these tribal aesthetics with advanced technology and just these terrifying like mandibles that it has on its face, just set a really high bar for these practical creature effects, and it remains a benchmark, I think, to this day. Um, just that unique visual of the predator's thermal vision is just also a very lasting, innovation for movies in general. Um, and this film's success, directly led to a long running, multimedia franchise. So not only do we have movie sequels like Predator 2, Predators, and a prequel that we're going to be talking about tonight as well. That was a first time watch for me, Prey. And then there was crossover films with the Alien franchise, Alien versus Predator and Alien versus Predator Requiem, which we'll be talking about tonight as well. Um, and those are generally kind of less well regarded than the standalone Predator films. Um, they're still beloved by a lot of fans out there, including myself. I really like the first Alien versus Predator film. But, there's been numerous comic books and novels, video games and toys and all kinds of merchandise that's just expanded that whole lore, of the predator species, which I believe they named it the Yatsha or something like that. Um, I don't know. I don't remember them saying that in the movies, but I think that's what they said. It was like in the comics or something, which I've not read a whole lot of the comics of the Predator comics, but I do have a couple. But yeah, that's something I'm going to have to dabble in more, I think, in the future. But yeah, just the character of the Predator became this kind of major pop culture icon. And just several lines from the film have become embedded in pop culture as well. Most notably, Arnold Schwarzenegger's delivery of "Get to the chopper." I have a terrible Arnold Schwarzenegger impression, so don't butcher me too much over that. But that line is just instantly recognizable. It's especially nowadays. It's used so much in like the whole meme culture and stuff for like kids and everything. Like my son, who is just 12 years old, he he knew what "Get to the Chopper" was years ago, and just because of just the internet and just all that exposure stuff gets nowadays is crazy. Um, and just other lines in the movie. If it bleeds, we can kill it, and just the visual of the that exaggerated handshake between Dutch and Dylan just are all also widely recognized and referenced. Um, and I spoke of John McTiernan doing Die Hard earlier, and while Die Hard is arguably McTiernan's most influential action film overall, um, Predator showcased his ability to create those intense, location specific, just and that tension and that all that action that progresses in throughout these films. It in Predator also reinforced the idea that sometimes the most effective threat isn't a faceless army, but a single unstoppable intelligent force. Um, and the film structure starting as one type of movie and evolving into something else. That's that. Like I said, that's been adopted by many other films in the past. Um, and this was released at a time when CGI was kind of non-existent, and Predator is a powerful example of how effective practical effects like costumes, makeup, the animatronics, all that you know can be in creating this tangible, terrifying creature. The the decision to just largely rely on practical effects for the Predator itself, you know, contributes significantly to why the film still holds up visually today. Um, and despite this film being over 35 years old now, Predator remains incredibly rewatchable and just maintains a strong fan base. It has this straightforward premise, strong execution, memorable characters, and all of that ensures its status, I think, as a beloved classic in action, sci-fi, and horror, and all those circles of fans. Um, it's kind of has this critical appraisal, reappraisal, I guess I should say, over the years, and it has solidified its position as a key film of the 1980s. Um, but yeah, I mean, Predator is just like I said, this is one of my all-time favorite movies when it comes to the 1980s, when it comes to action films, when it comes to sci-fi films. I mean, it is an absolute perfect film in my eyes, an absolute masterpiece. And if you haven't seen Predator by now, what are you doing watching this video? Leave right now and go watch that movie. But moving on now to Predator 2 from 1990. Okay, so like I said, I am a huge, huge Predator fan, and when it comes to Predator 2, I don't see it why it's just some forgotten sequel or something that's even subpar to the original film, as a lot of fans do. I put Predator 2 right up there with the original Predator, and the reason I say that is because this movie is so different from the original, but it's just as exciting in my opinion because it pieces together these things that we already know about the original film, and then we take it to a completely different environment in Los Angeles. The streets of Los Angeles where there's all this um, drug lord crime going on and just a lot of different crazy things that's completely different from the original film. But there are elements that tie them both together. And by the end of the film of Predator 2, it expands that universe and that lore of the predator species and its history. So yeah, I absolutely love this movie, and it's absolutely balls to the wall, and just so forget all the naysayers when it comes to Predator 2. I just think it takes this core concept, pumps it full of adrenaline, and just drops it into a completely different kind of jungle than what we see in the original film. Um, so this movie Predator 2, it had the balls, to pull the universe's most dangerous game hunter out of this, the sweltering Central American rainforest, and it plops him down into this, this very concrete, glass, steel jungle of just a near future Los Angeles, um, and just the core concept of this is simple, but it's brilliant in my opinion. So what happens when an invisible, technologically superior alien tracker decides to go to this urban, turf war and heat wave of Los Angeles? I mean, it sees this as this like perfect hunting ground. So the film centers around this LAPD lieutenant, Mike Harrigan, who is played by the amazing Danny Glover. Um, and Harrigan is old school. He's very stubborn. He's dedicated to what he does. He's not afraid to bend the rules or throw a punch as a cop. He's dealing with this brutal, like escalating, gang war between these Colombian and Jamaican posses, um, specifically the Jamaican voodoo posse. Um, and that's what's tearing the city apart. But soon, a far more sinister force enters the fray, leaving behind this trail of skinned bodies and this strange, unsettling tech that he beholds. Um, so the story here, unfolds as this kind of gritty, violent police, procedural, slowly colliding head on with sci-fi horror. And Harrigan, and his team, including the cool-headed Leona, and Danny Boy, and of course, how can I forget the Jerry Lambert, played by the legendary Bill Paxton, who in this film is in peak Bill Paxton form. And something cool about that, so I haven't mentioned yet. So I have in the past here on the channel, I watched the Terminator, the original Terminator. I just on this past Saturday, I watched Aliens, or I talked about Aliens, and now we're here at Predator 2. And Bill Paxton holds the honor, I guess you could say, of being the only human character in the Terminator films, in the Alien films, and in the Predator films to be killed by all three of those main antagonists. So, yeah. And I'm a huge Bill Paxton fan, and he was always a guy that I really wanted to meet. He was always like on my bucket list of celebrities to meet. And unfortunately, he did pass away several years ago. So, um, yeah, just it's very sad but he seemed like such a cool guy. And one of my favorite movies he's in is called Frailty. Um, but I don't want to get. I'll talk about Bill Paxton forever, but I don't want to get off track here. But anyway, like I said, Harrigan has got all of these people kind of backing him up, and this little team he has put together. Um, but then they find themselves up against something that they can't comprehend. So here enters Peter Keys, played by Gary Busey, and this is just Gary Busey being Gary Busey, just at this time as a determined government agent. And he leads this very shady like task force, um, called the OWLF, which is Otherworld Life Forms. and they're already tracking the predator, and they're wanting to capture it because they are aware of its history, and they know about the events that happened with Dutch and his team from the first film. So Keys represents that very cynical, governmental attempt to weaponize or understand this alien creature. Um, contrasting these kind of sharply with Harrigan's primal, protective instinct to stop the killing. So the film just escalates beautifully. We see the predator adapting, using this whole crowded environment of Los Angeles to its advantage. Picking off targets like the gangsters first, and then those who kind of pose a threat to him. Um, and just it showcases these new and like terrifying like weaponry. Like the combi stick spear that he has, the sticky net gun, the deadly like smart disc thing that he has. I'm not even sure if that's what it's called, but that's what I always called it. So the hunt moves from like rooftops to subway tunnels to apartments to slaughterhouses, and finally the creature's own spacecraft. Um, and what makes Predator 2 work so well for a fan is how it expands that lore without retconning, the first film. It shows the predator isn't just a creature; it's a part of a species with a code of sorts, I guess, um, and just a history of hunting on Earth across these kind of different eras. So the urban setting isn't just a backdrop; it's kind of active participant, providing new challenges and opportunities for both the predator and prey. And the heat here, the chaos, the noise, it's a sensory overload that the predator just thrives in. Um, and who is the director of this film? So the director here for Predator 2 is Stephen Hopkins. And Stephen Hopkins is known for, high energy, often action packed, genre films. Like before Predator 2, he had directed A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. And after Predator 2, he went on to direct films like The Ghost in the Darkness from 1996. It has Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer. He did that Lost in Space remake film from '98. And just his style kind of often involves these very this kinetic camera work and intense pacing, just a focus on building tension and delivering these kind of impactful action sequences. Um, and you can see this clearly in Predator 2's relentless opening shootout. The terrifying subway sequence and also the final pursuit through the spacecraft itself at the end. He, Stephen Hopkins, he embraced that whole violent nature, of the script and just committed to making that urban environment feel just as dangerous and as claustrophobic as the jungle from the first film. And for years, Predator 2 was often, I think, unfairly compared to the perfect film that is the original. And it's been dismissed by some fans as just kind of a gory sequel. Um, that's not as nearly as good as the original. But I disagree. And I think there are other dedicated fans to Predator 2 here as well. That just where the impact is very undeniable and just incredibly significant because this film is perhaps its most the expansion of the universe and the lore of the predator species. I think this is perhaps its most crucial contribution because Predator 2 moved the predator species or the Yaksha from being a single mysterious threat to a species with culture, technology, history, um, and the reveal of the predator ship in this is and just, it's the whole design, the trophies we see with including the xenomorph skull, just everything about it was so cool. And just like in that trophy, like that whole trophy room, like I said, the xenomorph skull and all that, and there's also like a T-Rex skull, just showing that the Predator's collection of these skulls, really cemented the idea that these creatures are these intergalactic hunters with just a very long history, and they're directly connected the Predator universe to the Alien universe within that shot, and that's ultimately I think what set the stage for the Alien versus Predator comics, the games, the films. Just that single Easter egg alone had a massive ripple effect on both of those franchises. And within that ending sequence, we also see the elders. So there's this appearance of multiple predators at the end, including the elder predator, who gives Harrigan the antique pistol from 1719, I think was the year, which we'll talk more a little bit about that here in a little bit. But this just kind of established this kind of code of honor, slash, respect for worthy adversaries. And it showed that the hunt wasn't just a random slaughter, but part of this kind of larger ritual for that species. Um, so Predator 2, it demonstrated that the core concept of this, technologically advanced alien, um, just tracking human prey, work outside the traditional jungle environment, just the urban jungle, if you want to call it that, the streets of Los Angeles prove to be a very fresh and just exciting setting, to me at least, just, because it offered new ways for the predator to stalk, and for these humans to react. Um, and I just think this paved the way for future stories set in different locations within that universe, of these characters. Um, but and I mentioned a lot of like the new tech that is seen here in Predator 2. It this film introduced a lot of iconic, Predator weaponry, beyond the shoulder cannon and the wrist blades. Um, like I mentioned them earlier, the combi stick, the net gun, the smart disc. Those are all now like staple parts of the Predator arsenal in all kinds of subsequent media, whether it be comics, games, the action figure line that NECA puts out. I mean, there's like a fucking ton Predator figures. I can't even start to collect those at this point. There's way over 100 different figures put out, possibly over 200. I don't even know at this point. I've lost track of how many Predator figures that NECA has put out, but it's incredible. But like all of these things that kind of began within Predator 2 have carried on into all of that, into those games, into those comics, into the toys, whatever. Um, so it really does surprise me that that Predator 2 does not get more love than what it gets, because I just think this is a very amazing film, and it just a lot of things have, of other types of media and merchandise have drawn inspiration from it. So yeah, I think this is a very important film in the whole Predator franchise. Um, and another difference here to why I love this film is if you look at the main heroes, when it comes to the original film and this film. So Harrigan, played by Danny Glover here, he isn't Dutch. He's not Dutch at all from the original film. Harrigan, he's older. He relies more on grit, on street smarts, and just sheer stubbornness, pretty much. Um, it's as if you're watching his character from the Lethal Weapon movies. Um, just chasing after a predator in Los Angeles. He's too old for this shit, but he does it anyway. And he Danny Glover brings this very different energy to this film, showing that humans could overcome this threat without being, peak physical specimens like Arnold was in the original. Um, but more so by being, resourceful and just unrelenting. And you know, uh, as I've said already, while this film is not a critical darling or anything, um, it definitely has, developed, I think, a strong cult following amongst a lot of fans over the years. And, because there's fans out there like myself who appreciate, its boldness, its gore, its expanded lore. Um, didn't mean to rhyme there, but I did. Uh, and it's very unique atmosphere. I think has led to this kind of slow but steady reappraisal of its place in the franchise. And just there's a lot of people out there that that I have talked to that champion this. I have a friend Kelvin who says that Predator 2 is his favorite in the entire franchise. So me and him get along really well when it comes to talking about this film. But um, you know, like I mentioned earlier, this film set the stage for a lot of future media. The elements that were introduced in this film, the urban hunt, the expanded lore, the alien skull, and it all provided this kind of fertile ground for comics and novels, video games, and ultimately the entire Alien versus Predator, you know, sub franchise, and also later Predator films that kind of build on these concepts. In summary, I guess Predator 2 from a fan's perspective is, I think, a misunderstood gem. It's loud, it's violent, it's sweaty. It's exactly what a sequel to Predator should have been. Because it's not a rehash, but it's a bold escalation that kind of takes this terrifying idea and drops it into a new chaotic hunting ground. Um, while fundamentally, expanding the universe that we love. And, it gave us more tech, more, insight into the species, and just, of course, that legendary, alien skull Easter egg. I think that this film is essential viewing for any true Predator fan because it's not just a sequel, it's the urban expansion pack that the franchise needed. So, um, and it just opened like I said, what else can we say? I mean, if you've not watched Predator, if you've not watched Predator 2, seriously, or if you have watched them, if you've not watched them in a while, I highly recommend, revisiting those films because they're just to me they're the two most amazing films in the Predator franchise. But now we move on to a much later film. So this film didn't come out till 20 years later after Predator 2. And so this film was long awaited. Before I get into this film, this is Predators, by the way, from 2010. Um, so I have a little story about this film. So when this film came out, I went to the theaters and saw this, and I was super excited because I was like, "Oh yes, finally!" And another Predator film that was not Alien versus Predator, but just a standalone Predator film. And going into it, I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be a remake or a reboot, whatever. I wasn't sure if it's continuing the story from the first two Predator films. Didn't really know. But so. I planned to go see this with a group of friends of mine, and it also kind of at the same time was this blind date that I went on, and I'd never done a blind date before. So I was like, but it was a friend of my friends, and they're like, hey, let's just let's hook these two up or whatever. I was like, okay, whatever. So went on this blind date with the rest of our friends, and we went out, and ate and everything first before we went to the movie, and I already wasn't feeling any kind of good vibe with this girl, and she, when we went out to eat, she would rarely talk to me or even look at me, and she would spend most of the time, talking to the other people at the table, and then afterwards, I was like, all right, I'll still give this girl the benefit of the doubt. And we went to go see the movie. And I love the movie, by the way. I absolutely love this movie. And I'll get into that here in a little bit. But we sit and watch the movie and all that. And after it's said and done, I turn to the girl and I say, well, how did you feel about the movie? And she said, oh, I thought it was awful. That was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, that was kind of the breaking point for me, and so after that, after the whole date and everything was over and I went home, uh, never talked to that girl again. So, I mean, if you can't appreciate Predator or any of the Predator films, then I have no time for you. But luckily, later that year I did meet Candace and the rest is history. But let's go ahead and start talking about this film now. So, from the opening shot of this film with Adrian Brody, plummeting through the sky, unconscious, I knew this movie got it. You know, I think Predators strips away that kind of unnecessary lore building and universe expanding, of the crossover films like the Alien versus Predator films, and it gets back to that core concept, which is the hunt, and but it flips the script in a very brilliant way. And instead of the predator coming to our jungle, there's these group of very diverse and dangerous humans, and that are dropped into their jungle, the predator's jungle, and it's the ultimate, most dangerous game scenario taken to this alien planet, and it works spectacularly. And and I've talked to people in the past who have had differing opinions when it comes to this film. I've talked to people who have loved it, like myself. I've talked to people that have hated it and thought it was terrible, including the girl that I went on that blind date with. But you know, it's whatever. But what I loved most was the return to that feeling of being kind of utterly outmatched and hunted. The original Predator, thrived on suspense and atmosphere and just that kind of slow reveal of the monster. This film, Predators, doesn't spend as much time on the reveal, but it doubles down on the tension and the feeling of being on unfamiliar ground against these superior trackers and killers. And the environment isn't just a backdrop, it's a part of the trap. So the cast, you know, while not on the same caliber as like, Arnold's crew, the cast here is still surprisingly effective. Each character I think is essentially, a walking weapon or a survival tool, plucked from these kind of different, fields of human conflict. You have this calculated mercenary, played by Adrian Brody. His name is Royce, and then you have like this moral sniper, played by I forget the girl who plays her, but her character name is Isabel. And then you got like the very unpredictable convict played by Walton Goggins, who's huge now. I mean, thanks to a lot of like Fallout and stuff that he's done here lately, and he was in Sons of Anarchy. All kind. I mean, guy's huge. Got a huge following now. Um, then you got the Yakuza enforcer. I guess he's like from the Yakuza. I don't think they ever really say, but his name is Hanzo, I think. And there's this kind of this the soldier guy. I forget what his name is honestly, and then the drug cartel enforcer, like Danny Trejo. Um, and there's a couple others. Forget his name. The play Edwin, the doctor. Fucking Topher Grace. That was on that '70s show. But anyway, these characters, they're not deep characters. Um, uh, but they serve their purpose. They showcase different reactions to in this impossible situation, and it provides this kind of varied um, menu, I guess, so to speak, for the predators. And seeing these kind of apex human killers become the prey is just, I think, the central thrill to this film. And the movie definitely leans into that. So the predators themselves, like, yeah, and when I say predators, like, there's more than one here. And so it's kind of this introduction of these super predators. Or there's the tracker predator, there's the berserker, the falconer, um, and it really adds this very interesting dynamic. They aren't just carbon copies of the jungle hunter predator that we knew from the original film. They're bigger, they're meaner, and they seem to have this kind of tribal rivalry with this classic looking predator that they have captured in the film. So this kind of differentiation, it suggests different clans or species of the Yaksha in that sense. So that itself feels like a natural expansion of the lore to me. And just seeing the classic Predator armor again, even if it's briefly, it was a very nice nod to the original. And the Predator dogs were also a very cool addition to the film. Um, but the action here is just it's brutal. It's effective. It's not overly flashy or anything, but it's more grounded in that struggle to survive. And there's a scene with the Yakuza guy Hanzo. He has this duel with the Falconer Predator using this samurai sword, and uh, that's an absolute highlight to me, for me personally, because where I'm just so interested in the whole Japanese culture and everything about the samurai and just everything about it. So if you've ever watched any movies with Sonny Chiba, like the Street Fighter, like I love all kinds of that stuff, and I'm sure I'll get into more of that type of stuff as the channel progresses and as it goes on throughout the year. But that scene alone is just an absolute highlight to me, and it's pure fan service. I think done right. It shows um, that human skill against this alien might. The traps, the close calls, the moments of brief, desperate fighting back. It all felt true, I think, to the spirit of the original film. Um, and I've said that to people before, and they've like scoffed at me. But it just, I mean, it's apples and oranges, man. People have difference of opinion, and just that was a big thing about it that I really enjoyed. Um, and then there's a twist to this film. So there's this character that Lawrence Fishburne plays named Noland, and it's a very brief part of the film, but his character represents that kind of mental toll of surviving too long in this environment, this hellscape, and it offers this kind of exposition or this warning about what this place does to you, and the score over this film, it incorporates elements from Alan Silvestri's iconic original work, and if you're not familiar with that name, Alan Silvestri, he also did a ton of stuff when it comes to music. One of his most famous would be his score for the Back to the Future trilogy. But yeah, he's a huge name when it comes to film and scoring films. So, yeah, he did the original, and like I said, there are elements of that his original work within this film as well. And I think that's really what kind of helps build the atmosphere perfectly here. Also, like the familiar clicks and roars and the thermal vision effects, from the predators. It's all it's all there, and it's very crisp and satisfying. Um, and for a Predator fan, this movie to me was a really a breath of fresh air. It respected the source material. It showed that it was kind of continuing that saga because it even alludes to the events of the original film. I think everything here delivered on the premise, and it gave us that core that of the franchise back. Um, just that the ultimate hunt on a deadly planet, and it proved that that concept still has legs, and it doesn't need aliens or well, xenomorphs, I guess in this case, um, or any kind of convoluted mythology for it to work. It just needs badasses, a jungle, and a predator. And hey, what's going on, Papa? Glad to see you in here, man. I hope you said you hope you're doing well. Yeah, I am. I'm doing great. I feel great today. Like I said earlier in the stream, if you weren't in here, um, I was supposed to have done this stream last night, man, and just got really sick. Just all of a sudden last night was feeling like absolute shit, and but thankfully, that was kind of like whenever I get sick, it's weird. Like whenever I get sick, it doesn't last very long. So I'm thankful for that. I'm very lucky when it comes to that. But I'm here tonight talking about Predator movies. Glad to have you here, buddy. But you said good riddance to that girl. Yeah, for sure, man. Like that's just I've I've told that story to several people over the years, and just yeah, it was one of the worst dates I'd ever been on in my life. But thankfully, I don't have to worry about dating anymore. I've been married for the past 13 years now. So, but yeah, glad to have you here, man. Glad you was able to take time to listen to me ramble about the Predator movies. Um, but I like I said, I love this movie. It's like when I went into it, I wasn't really sure what it was going to be. But based on what tells in the story, it is a direct sequel. Though largely it does kind of almost feel like a standalone film too. And just it follows that group of these skilled killers and just kind of throws them into this environment that they're not sure what it is, but they're on this when they realize they're on another planet. They're on this hunting ground that is almost used for this species of the predator to kind of for like a training ground. So yeah, it's just that whole concept is just very cool to me, and just that whole story that focuses on the group's survival and struggle, paranoia, these kind of internal conflicts between one another. um I think that just all kind of like works in its own way, because in the end they kind of have to come together, and just it almost becomes like a survival of the fittest or survival of the strongest. When it comes to confronting these super predators head on. Um, but as far as the director goes for this, the director of Predators is I may be saying this guy's name wrong. I apologize, but Nimrod and Tell. So Nimrod, I hope I'm saying his name right. Maybe Nimrod. I don't know. Anyway, but Nimrod here is a Hungarian American film director. He's a screenwriter, and I've not seen outside of Predators. I've not seen a lot of his stuff. Ones that stand out to me that I have seen though is Vacancy from 2007. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie, but it's just kind of this horror slash thriller that's kind of centered around these people that are stranded at this kind of seedy motel and discover that snuff films have been made in their room, and Luke Wilson's in it, Kate Beckinsale. Um, but other than that, like the only other thing that I know him from is he directed episodes 5 and 6 of Stranger Things season 4. So I'm a huge Stranger Things fan too. And I'm highly anticipating that fifth season to start later this year, and that's going to be it. No more Stranger Things after that season. So I'm gonna be a sad crater after after Stranger Things is gone. But anyway, before Predators, Nimrod and Tell was primarily known, for these kind of suspenseful, often claustrophobic or kind of tightly focused thrillers. Um, and this film really showcased his ability, I thought, to build that atmosphere, and that movie Vacancy, demonstrated his skill in creating this tension in very simple and scary scenarios. Um, and while Predators was a bigger budget studio picture than all of his previous work, he brought this very gritty, practical approach to the action, and just really maintained a sense of this very oppressive atmosphere that served that material well. And he's known for his kind of visual style. If especially if you watch those episodes of Stranger Things that I'm talking about, um, he is very engaging when it comes to that whole genre. Um, but outside of that, the legacy and the impact that this film brought, I think that this movie holds a significant and kind of primarily positive legacy and impact, in my opinion. Especially within the context of the Predator franchise. Um, and I think its most immediate impact was, revitalizing the Predator brand. After the kind of when it comes to fans, the unpopular, Alien versus Predator films. Um, Although I do like the first Alien versus Predator, I can't lie. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit, why I like those films. Um, but Predators wasn't widely seen by fans and critics as a return to the roots of the original film. Um, it's focusing solely on the predator as the hunter against human prey. It it stripped away that crossover baggage that a lot of fans didn't like, and I just like it because it got back to that core concept, proving that just the original formula was still kind of potent. You know what I mean? Um, and I think among all the sequels to the original Predator, um, this one to me is one of my most highly regarded sequels. I mean, I don't enjoy it as much as I do Predator 2, but this one is a very close third place uh, for me when it comes to the Predator films. Um, you know, and like I said, it doesn't reach that iconic status of the original 1987 film, um, but I think that this is, definitely, ranked as one of the best sequels to the franchise. I think a lot of that is thanks to the tone and the themes and the structure that we have here in this film, because it kind of like pays homage to a lot from the original, and I just think that kind of there's a lot of positive reception that came out of this that kind of helped rebuild, fan enthusiasm for the franchise. Um, you know, because we since this came out, we got the Predator that came out, I think in like 2017 or 2018. I can't remember what year it came out. And then Prey from 2022, and then we're getting a new Predator film this year, Badlands. Um, and Not crazy about all the CGI that's going to be used in that film, but I'm excited to see Badlands because it's also, going to be incorporating the Alien franchise in that as well. Because if you watch the trailer, you'll see that there is a android, a Wayland Utani android, in the trailer. So, not sure where this film is going to lie. If this is going to continue um, the ongoing franchise of Predator, Predator Two, Predators, Prey, or it's going to be like in the canon of that universe of Alien versus Predator. So I guess we'll see. I guess when the movie comes out, we'll see where it really lies, what timeline it lies on. So, um, but just the getting back to Predators from 2010, you know, the proof of the proof of concept with this film is that it demonstrated that the most dangerous game premise could be successfully expanded and placed on this alien world, and just it really adds that new dimension to the hunt. I think, um, while keeping the focus on the human survival horror and the action, and it showed that the predator didn't need to come to Earth to be effective. So it brings the prey to the predator's environment. I just thought that was a very compelling alternative to what we're used to, and you know this just that the predator the whole game preserve concept here as well. Predators kind of firmly established the idea of the yaksha, if you want to call them that. The predator species or clan. Just using the specific planet as hunting grounds, or preserves where they drop off and hunt various dangerous species. Just training themselves like a training ground, like I mentioned earlier. Including these humans. Um, and just this concept really became a key piece of the that expanded lore that resonates, I think, with fans, and kind of provides grounds for future stories. Um, but overall, Predators 2010 is that sequel that reminded everyone why the original Predator worked. It's seen as the franchise's strongest comeback moment post Alien versus Predator, um, and it's a respected entry by a lot of fans out there, including myself. And it's a film that successfully expanded that universe's scope while staying true to its core identity. Man being hunted by the galaxy's ultimate sportsman or whatever. It's legacy of that good sequel or whatever that the franchise desperately needed. It definitely needed because As much as I enjoyed the first Alien versus Predator, a lot of fans were not happy with it. Even more fans were not happy with the sequel to Alien versus Predator. So after those films, for a lot of fans, um, a lot of people seen that character of the Predator and that franchise kind of dead in the water. Um, but this film, in my opinion, revitalized all of that. And like I said, it's what the franchise desperately needed. Um, and it just, it set that high bar, for what a Predator follow up should be. Um, which leads me now to the next film that I'll be talking about. And this was a film, this was a first time watch for me. I had never seen this film before. Um, because I did something that I don't normally do, and I listened to other people's opinions on it and just their reviews and stuff, and just like it kind of scared me away. And this is the same shit that I did with those prequels to Alien with Prometheus and Covenant and all that. And I just went years without seeing those movies. Well, thankfully, it's not been that long since Prey was released. This movie was released back in 2022. Um, and, I had a few gripes with this film, but overall, I think I love this film. This is definitely a movie that will be rewatchable for me. And at its core, Prey is a prequel, is set in the North American Great Plains in the year 1719. And what else do we know came from 1719? The gun that was given to Harrigan at the end of Predator 2. So that's the date that's on the side plate on the gun. And we'll see more about that within this film. So the story here tells the tale of Naru, who is played by a really good actress, Amber Midthunder. She's this young woman of the Comanche Nation who is this skilled healer, but yearns to prove herself as a hunter. So she feels kind of stifled and underestimated by all the men in her tribe. Particularly her older brother, Tabe, who is this very accomplished warrior in the tribe. So the film here follows Naru as she tracks, signs that she believes indicate a very powerful unknown creature is hunting in their territory. Um, a creature that's far more dangerous than any bear or mountain lion or anything that their tribe has faced. So, of course, this creature is a predator, or in this case, the feral predator. Um, which is a very younger, slightly different variant than the one we know from the '87 original film. So this movie meticulously, builds the tension as Naru goes from initially mistaking the signs for other animals to realizing something truly alien and terrifying is loose, and then setting her sights on confronting it. So it's a classic man, or in this case, woman versus alpha predator, that type of story. But, just flipped on its head and filtered through a completely different, cultural and technological lens. Instead of a squad of these heavily armed commandos, we just have this young woman, and her loyal dog, Sari, I think his name is, and just her ingenuity and she has the tools of her era. She has it's a tomahawk on a rope. She has bow and arrows, snares. She's very limited here. It's very, um, you know, um, it's a very primal type setting. These these all these original tools and weapons for survival. So and it just kind of gives this really deep understanding, of the land and its inhabitants. But the predator, in turn, uses its advanced cloaking, that thermal vision, the plasma casters, wrist blades, the net gun, just everything we know and love when it comes to the predator species weaponry. Just that sheer physical dominance, that's and then the core conflict is, stripped down to a desperate, primal hunt for survival, where intellect, adaptability, and knowledge of the environment becomes this, the ultimate weapons against this kind of superior firepower. So it's very ironic. Um, and the director of this of Prey is Dan Trachtenberg, and Dan Trachtenberg is primarily known for his work in the whole thriller and sci-fi genres. Um, his most prominent previous feature film was 10 Cloverfield Lane with John Goodman and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I think is the girl that's in that. But it's been a long time since I've seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, but um, his work on that movie, really made him, I think, an inspired choice for Prey. He proved that he could take this existing beloved franchise concept like Cloverfield had, and tell this story within its universe without being a direct sequel. In this case, Prey is a prequel to the rest of the Predator franchise, and he builds this immense tension, with these character dynamics and these very limited settings, and just and he delivers this very satisfying, like just genre thrill, I guess. It just his style focuses on on atmosphere and these character driven, suspense and just often kind of minimalist like storytelling, which is I think is exactly what the Predator franchise needed after years of trying to go bigger and louder, and you know what I mean. But this is perhaps, I think, one of the most impactful films of the legacy of the Predator franchise. And I know that's a bold statement, but I think for years the Predator franchise um, was feeling lost, uh, and Predators from 2010 really kind of like picked up what the franchise needed. But I mean, there wasn't really much after that release like that had been, brought to audiences out there and fans out there other than the Predator movie that came out like 2017, 2018, whatever. Which, and I didn't watch that movie again for this week too when I was going to be talking about these films because it's okay, but it's nothing really that I would really wanna watch again, just to be honest with you. It's to me, it's one of the weakest, entries in the franchise, the one from 2017 or 18, whenever it came out. But to me, like, this film, the prequel, it really it I think it's what the franchise needed. And like I said, this movie just came out about 3 years ago, and it saw enough success that we're already getting another Predator film this year in Badlands. So I feel like, even though there's people out there that don't really care for Prey, I feel like it's doing something right. If it's already had enough success to where we're getting another film in the franchise. So yeah, but but after the original masterpiece back in '87, um, all the sequels and the crossover attempts, there's times when they really miss the mark. I wouldn't say that about Predator 2 or or Predators from 2010, but the Alien versus Predator films really kind of missed the mark in a lot of ways, and just they struggled to capture that magic and tension of those other films that I really enjoy. And so, but with Prey, I think Prey came in and just completely reset expectations. It proved that there was still this immense like potential in the core concept. You just needed the right story and the right talent to tell the story. And I think that Prey has generated, this kind of renewed excitement and hope for, you know, future installments. Already, we're getting Predator Badlands later this year, um, and I think there's a lot of excitement right now, amongst the fan base. Um, Now, this might be a bold statement, but I just think, I feel that Prey, in a way, saved the cinematic relevance of the Predator. Um, and it just the movie demonstrates that exploring different historical periods and these cultural contexts for the hunt is really a winning formula. And we saw the beginnings of that with Predator 2, as it was a different environment, and then we see at the end how like all of these kind of the trophies that they have and all the different creatures that they have skulls of, and just with the gun that is given to Harrigan with the dated 1719, which where this movie takes place. Um, instead of rehashing that kind of these modern military encounters, it looked backwards and sideways, kind of creating this very unique challenge for both the Predator and the human characters. Um, and it opens up this whole wealth of possibilities for future stories. Predators hunting samurai, Vikings, gladiators, the American Revolution. The potential is really limitless with this franchise, and the kind of world building with the historical elements attached to it. And just I think a lot of fans are kind of like just speculating, something that hadn't happened meaningfully in years, and it proves that the concept is very adaptable, and doesn't need to be confined to the jungle or these urban environments, or rely solely on these human special forces or anything like that. But Prey, it wasn't just loved by fans. It was a massive critical success. Because it received a lot of positive reviews. And I know there's a lot of negative reviews out there as well. But mostly positive reviews, kind of praising its tension and its action, performances, and just that kind of cultural authenticity. Um, and it was released primarily on streaming. I think Hulu was what it came out on, and it reportedly broke streaming records for Hulu upon the release. So that definitely indicates kind of this very significant commercial success in that type of distribution model. Um, but just that whole this critical and popular acclaim is, I think, crucial for studio confidence. And it's a big reason of why we're getting another Predator film already coming out later this year. Um, so that's a huge step forward, if you ask me. And just there was a lot of really cool representation in this. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but like just the film's focus on this very young um, Comanche woman as the hero here, and it's kind of genuine effort towards cultural authenticity, um, including there is a full Comanche language dub of this film. Because I know that is one of the complaints that some people had, like that the dialogue in this film and the conversations between the human characters in like perfect English, very it felt very modernish. Um, I can agree with that to an extent. Um, but I think really what saved this was that full Comanche language dub that exists out there for this film. So that's a very cool, like, legacy point, very major legacy point for the franchise. Um, I think it successfully, centered this kind of this story within a, of this, this Native American tribe, in this Hollywood, genre franchise, just proving that these diverse stories can be incredibly compelling and successful. And the character of Naru is a very powerful, complex, female lead whose strength comes from her intelligence and her observation and connection to her culture and environment, rather than simply being like a female version of a male action hero. So this really sets a positive precedent for representation, I think, in genre filmmaking. So it's very, very cool to me. Um, and I think that just Prey really achieved its success by just stripping down all that mythology and focusing on those fundamentals. A hunter, a prey, in this stark environment. It didn't rely on convoluted lore or these massive CGI spectacles. Although the Predator is CGI in this, the action in the film feels more grounded though. Just its impact, I think, really reinforces the idea that returning to the core character driven tension and suspense that made the original work is more effective than trying to outdo, you know, previous entries, if that makes sense. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm really excited for the future of the franchise. I'm excited for Badlands to come out. So I think, you know, I, in my personal opinion, I think that movie is going to lie more on the timeline of the Alien versus Predator films. But I could be wrong. And the only reason I'm saying that is because in the trailer it shows the android. It's going to be one of the characters in the film, and it's a Wayland Yutani android. So, of course, Wayland Yutani, all that's within the Alien franchise. So, will this be a continuation of the Alien versus Predator um, universe? I guess we'll see. Um, but speaking of the Alien versus Predator universe, now I'm going to talk about the films that I even debated whether to talk about or not. What now? While I do enjoy the first of these two films, um, which came out, this one came out in 2004. Um, there was a sense of dread within myself to even talk about the second one, Requiem. But I watched it. I'm going to talk about it. It's only fair, that if I watched it, I got to talk about it with you guys. So let's start off now, though, with Alien versus Predator from 2004. And so this is the live action cinematic debut of that crossover concept that had been, within the comic book and the video game worlds for years. Um, and the premise is very simple, and kind of elegant from a Predator fan's point of view. So deep beneath the ice of Buvatoya Island, I think is how you pronounce it. It's something weird like that. But it's out in the Antarctic, and there's this heat signature is detected. And this team of scientists, explorers, led by this lady named Lex Woods, they investigate and discover this massive ancient pyramid that is buried thousands of feet down below the surface. And it turns out that this isn't just any pyramid. So according to predator lore that's established here, it's this ancient hunting ground that's used by the yaksha or the predator species uh, for for millenniums now, and every 100 years they lure humans to the site and awaken this xenomorph queen and let her lay eggs. So the the resulting xenomorphs serve as the ultimate prey for these young, predators in this kind of sacred rite of passage. And it's a brutal kind of high stakes hunt designed to test their mettle and earn them their stripes, literally in some cases. Um, so our human team gets caught in the middle of this ritual hunt, and when the xenomorphs ends up hatching, the predators descend from orbit to begin this hunt. So the movie basically becomes this giant multi-level battle royale inside of this shifting pyramid. With humans desperately trying to survive, being caught between two these apex species, um, who view them as little more than collateral damage or at best potential shields or whatever. Uh, so for a Predator fan, the allure I think is clear here. This isn't just a random encounter. It's a structured, ancient ritual. It gives the Yaksha a clear, driving motivation linked directly to their culture and history. And they aren't just stumbling upon these xenomorphs. They are cultivating them for this perfect hunt. Um, and the director of Alien versus Predator here is Paul W.S. Anderson. So Anderson is primarily known for directing action and sci-fi films. Often with kind of a distinctive visual style and focus on spectacle, even sometimes kind of criticized for story depth. Um, I think his most prominent body of work is probably the Resident Evil film franchise. Where he directed the first movie in 2002, and then he returned for Afterlife and Retribution and the final chapter, which all those star Mila Jovovich. In other films that he did Mortal Kombat from 1995. He did Event Horizon from 97, which is an amazing sci-fi horror film, crossover film. If you've never seen that, definitely highly recommend Event Horizon. Um, but for Alien versus Predator, Anderson's background, in action, sci-fi, and adapting these popular lore-heavy properties made him sorry, I think I'm developing a cold or something. I don't know what the hell's going on with me. But anyway, I was saying it made Anderson this very kind of fitting choice for this movie. I think, at least in theory, his strength lies in kind of staging these creature effects and action sequences, which is exactly what a movie titled Alien versus Predator needed. And while some people might find a lot of his character work lacking, but I think from a Predator fan's perspective, the focus should be on the monsters, and he certainly delivers on the the visual spectacle of the predators and the xenomorphs, clashing with one another here. Um, Now, if you paid attention, you might have noticed that I said earlier that I was. It's like as if I was separating the Alien franchise, the Predator franchise, from the Alien versus Predator movies, because I firmly believe that the story within the Alien versus Predator films is non-canon to the rest of the films in the Alien and Predator franchises. Um, and so yeah, so generally speaking, no, I don't. The story of Alien versus Predator and its sequel, Alien versus Predator Requiem, are to me considered non-canon with the main timelines, um, because there are a lot of inconsistencies with this. So the timeline presented in Alien versus Predator, particularly the idea of predators visiting Earth for millennia and the existence of xenomorphs in ancient times, just directly contradicts elements or leaves significant plot holes when trying to force it into this established story, of Alien and Predator, you know, um, because with Alien, the xenomorph discovery in the year 2122 as this kind of first contact scenario, and then Predator, which kind of focuses on modern day hunts, with Predator 2 showcasing this trophy from the 1700s, but not necessarily large scale Earth visitation. Um, so Ridley Scott, the director of the original Alien and the prequels as well that we covered on Alien Day this past Saturday, has pretty much stated that he doesn't consider the Alien versus Predator films a part of the Alien saga that he's telling. And I'm glad he feels that way. I definitely agree. Um, and similarly, the subsequent Predator films like Predators and the Predator and Prey, um, they don't reference or build upon the events of the Alien vs Predator films. So it just feels like this whole separate universe. It's best to view it that way too. It's kind of existing in its own distinct cinematic universe, and I think that's why a lot of fans, a lot of people that were familiar with the previous Alien films and Predator films, um, came to dislike these movies so much. But if you can view it as like this standalone story, based on the shared concept and characters that originate from the comics and the games, um, it you know it doesn't seem as bad. There's parts of it that can come off as entertaining and very enjoyable. Um, but it doesn't tie into that specific continuity arc of the main movie franchises. Um, However, there while it's not canon to the other films in my belief, I think that the Alien versus Predator concept itself is deeply rooted in that non-film media like the comics and the games, where the crossover did originate and it was thriving. There was a huge fan base for the comics and the video games and all the action figures that were coming out in the 90s and all that. So the whole idea, just a predators hunting xenomorphs is, I think, absolutely canon, within the broader Alien versus Predator universe that exists alongside, but separate from the main movie timelines. Um, and from a fan's perspective, I think of it as kind of an Elseworlds or what if story. Um, that's the way that's the perspective that I go with when I'm watching these films. It's a more valid exploration of the concept, even if it doesn't fit nearly into the primary continuity. And honestly, as a Predator fan, I care more about seeing the Predators fight aliens, then whether it perfectly aligns with Ripley's timeline, as an example. Um, but just the fact that they brought this crossover to live action, I think, is undoubtedly the um, the biggest impact here that that this film could have had, because after years of success, in the comics, the Dark Horse comics, especially, and video games, Alien versus Predator, finally brought the long demanded clash of these iconic creatures to the big screen. So for fans who grew up with that kind of crossover media, um, this was a very monumental event, a dream come true, if you will, to see the Yaksha and the Xenomorphs, fighting it out with these kind of Hollywood production values. Um, it proved that there was a massive audience hunger for this specific concept. Um, and it also, firmly established this kind of distinct, cinematic universe where the crossover, could exist. While this led to the sequel, Requiem. It highlights that kind of story challenge of integrating this concept into that um, existing separate continuities. So it's very interesting if you look at it that way. I feel like it's you can at least enjoy this first film out of the two Alien versus Predator films. Um, but we'll get more into Requiem when we get there, because it may not be come off as a more as a as positive as this. But ultimately, just there was, even though there was divisiveness amongst fans and stuff, from my perspective, as a Predator fan, um, the entire legacy with this film is primarily just getting that damn fight to happen. It's the film that just finally delivered, on the promise of seeing the galaxy's greatest hunters take on the galaxy's most perfect organism in this live action slugfest. Um, it might not be a perfect film, and it might not fit into the official timelines or whatever, but it just gave us, the Scar Predator, the Celtic Predator, the Chopper Predator, going toe to toe, or in this case, mandible to mandible, with these waves of xenomorphs in this glorious and action packed sequences. It showed the Yaksha tactics, their reliance on tech, their surprising capability in close combat, and just their rigid cultural rituals. It's a film made for the spectacle and for fans of the Predator specifically. It delivers on that spectacle, I think, in spades. Um, and it's a fun, unapologetic, action focused creature feature. I think that celebrates the Predator side of the equation just as much as the Alien. And and for that, I'll always have respect for this film. Just the next time you're watching Alien vs. Predator, if you didn't really care for it the times that you have seen it, I suggest giving it another watch and just look at it from that perspective. And just look at it as a non-canon, exists in its own universe, kind of aligned with the comics and the video games. And maybe you might look at it in a different light. But now that brings me to the sequel to this film. And like I said, there's a sense of dread when I knew that I had to talk about this film. But let's talk about it. Alien versus Predator Requiem. So the concept of Alien versus Predator seemed like a dream born in the pages of Dark Horse Comics and just the and video games and all that. Uh, so it was the ultimate crossover. Bringing and it picks up immediately how the first Alien versus Predator film ends. Um, and like I said, I am a fan of the first Alien vs Predator film. It definitely has its moments, and it just really introduced some really cool Predator lore to that story. Um, and But it was rated PG-13, so there was a a part of it that felt a little bit compromised. So Requiem, however, was supposed to be this gritty R-rated course correction, where there is going to be it was a lot more violent, a lot more, to the core concept. Um, so a lot of fans were expecting more than what we actually got here. Um, it was supposed to be like that nightmare fuel that we all wanted as Alien and Predator fans. Um, but like I said, this movie it picks up immediately after the first movie ends, and we're on board the Predator scout ship heading away from Earth, and this chest burster emerges from the Celtic Predator who was face had the face hugger on, and on the island with the pyramid from the first film, the first Alien vs Predator film. But this isn't just any chest burster; it's the Pred Alien, which is the hybrid born from a predator host. And the Pred alien quickly and violently matures, um, ripping through the ship and its occupants. Just this causes the scout ship to crash, and near somewhere in Colorado, and the crash unleashes this handful of like face huggers, the Pred alien and the ship's cargo of xenomorphs onto this quiet forest and subsequently this unsuspecting small town. So, one thing I can say about this is it's a very interesting environment for both the alien and the predator creatures. Um, it's a little different from what they've done before, and I thought that's what was going to be most exciting about this film. Um, but there's just so much here that kind of uh, takes away from this film as a whole. But anyway, meanwhile, there's this distress signal sent from this kind of the scout ship to the predator home world, and in response, a single highly experienced, no nonsense predator, uh, known only as Wolf, which is kind of distinguished by his like missing mandibles and his collection of trophies from other species, including the alien queen's head, is dispatched to Earth. So his mission is to clean up this mess. This means hunting down and killing the xenomorphs, the pred alien, and just destroying any evidence, including the crashed ship and anyone who might have seen too much. So this is where the film then becomes this kind of two pronged narrative. Um, so the alien outbreak itself, and xenomorphs, they're breeding rapidly, using the local population as hosts. We get these kind of classic horror themes like the trapped family, the sheriff that's trying to maintain order. These teenagers that are just trying to hook up. Who stumble into all this. Um, and just the xenomorph actions kind of escalate from these isolated attacks to just overrunning key locations like the hospital. And that is another part of this movie that I do kind of like is the hospital scene because it does build a lot of tension and everything within those scenes. Um, and it's just really like crazy to see like these aliens, the xenomorphs, just stalking around these halls of the hospital, where the especially the like the maternity ward and all that. So then you look at the predators hunt. So the predator here, systematically tracks and dispatches, aliens and attempts to find the prey alien. He uses a variety of like classic predator gear, like his plasma caster, his wrist blades, net gun, and all that. And even some new tricks like this liquid that's it's blue liquid that is used to kind of dissolve bodies and evidence. So I thought that was a really cool addition too. But the core conflict kind of builds towards this confrontation between the predator and the pred alien, with the human survivors kind of caught literally in the crossfire as the xenomorph infestation threatens to consume the entire town. Um, and so the stakes are raised here, by the pred alien's unique ability, as revealed in the film, to implant these multiple embryos directly into host, bypassing that whole face hugger stage, which is kind of a really weird twist that kind of significantly upset Annie on the body count when it comes to that. So um, I can say I'm a little impressed by that. But this film is also, significantly darker and gorier than its predecessor. So it definitely does earn its R rating with the brutal kills and the graphic like chest burstings and all the severed limbs and all that. But and it leans hard into that whole horror aspect, but often kind of substitutes this genuine tension for shock value and nihilistic violence. Um, so the directors here, there's two directors actually this time, which is the brothers Strauss, Colin and Greg Strauss, and primarily they're known for their work in like visual effects. I'm pretty sure they co-founded this visual effects company named Hydraulics, and so before directing Alien vs Predator Requiem, they worked on special effects for numerous films, including Titanic, The X Files, Terminator 3, just to name a few. And but this was their directorial debut for a major feature film, and their background is crucial because it shows the creature effects, the action choreography, just the idea of these cool shots are kind of clearly informed by their these visual effects sensibilities. Um, However, the fundamental aspects of filmmaking, lighting and pacing and character development, building atmosphere are all kind of noticeably weak about this film. And I think that's why this film struggles so much. Like to me, I think it's still watchable at times, but just not something I want to revisit often. Um, but the that whole visual effects background, I think, makes those guys great at designing these components of the film, but less so at, just assembling them into this kind of cohesive, well lit, compelling story. Because and that's another thing I think that this film really struggles with is there is a lot of sequences and scenes in the film that are there's next to nothing when it comes to lighting, and it's the all the settings are so dark, so it's hard to tell what's going on at times. Um, but with these guys, the brothers Strauss, um, their only other like significant directorial effort, I think, since Alien vs Predator Requiem is the sci-fi film Skyline from 2010. But I've never seen that one, so I can't really give an opinion on that one. Um, but I did see that it largely received negative reviews. Again, being criticized for like prioritizing visual effects over narrative and character, much like this film. Um, so, as a fan, of Aliens, as a Predator, the legacy with this film is painful in a way, and this is the part that I was dreading talking about. So, um, it's generally considered the low point of both the Alien and Predator film franchises, or even the combined, Alien versus Predator franchise. Um, the fan reception with this one was overwhelmingly negative. Um, just the biggest, most glaring, and most frequently, I think, cited problem is the lighting. Um, the film is just frustratingly dark. I mean, just the action sequences that should be the selling point, with the Predator fighting the aliens, the Predator aliens rampage, they're those scenes are often obscured to the point of being unwatchable. As fans who waited decades to see these creatures clash, this felt like kind of a betrayal to fans. And beyond the darkness of that's in the film, these human characters that are in the film were generic. They felt idiotic at times. They served little purpose other than getting killed in these unpleasant ways. There's no Ripley, there's no Dutch like character to root for. Just a bunch of these dumbasses making these incredibly poor survival decisions. And there was a very kind of a mean spirited tone with this film too. It was aiming for that R-rated horror. But it often came across as kind of gratuitously violent and nihilistic without that kind of theme of that depth or suspense of the original films. Um, so the scene involving the Predator alien attacking pregnant women in a hospital was, I think, par- particularly notable, and just felt like shock value for its own sake rather than just kind of serving the story. Um, but it's definitely memorable. I will say that though. And there's a lot of wasted potential here too. Like the Pred Alien concept, while visually neat, it's felt underutilized in terms of terror or uniqueness, beyond its birthing method. Um, and the wolf predator was cool in concept too, but felt like a generic badass, rather than a character with motives or history beyond his job. Um, and going back to that whole confusion with the canon and everything, if the Alien versus Predator films are canon with the Alien franchise, with the Predator franchise, um, it's I think it's often debated um, amongst a lot of fans, but I think that this film really solidified its place in showing that this should be looked at least as non-canon to those franchises. So the ending where the Predator's plasma caster is, handed these human characters implied to be part of, Wayland Utani is a direct nod to Predator 2. And it's kind of awkwardly trying to stitch these timelines together, but feeling forced. So yeah, the ending of this film is pretty rough for me, because like after it ended, the way it ended, how everything went down, and just my other gripes about the film, um, there was a huge part of me that did not want to see this universe continue, at least on film. Um, and it hasn't for many years, but like that brings me back to the Predator film that's coming out this year, Badlands. If that's going to be directly tied to these Alien versus Predator films or not, because of the involvement of with Wayland Utani. But I don't know. I guess we'll find out when it comes to that. Um, yeah, this film, it definitely, um, I think it killed that whole Alien vs Predator film series. At least for the time being. Um, just the poor reception here and that moderate box office, you know, effectively put an end to those crossover films just for the foreseeable future. But that could be Badlands could be the end of that. So I guess we'll see. Um, but I guess just to make this short, in summary, the legacy of Alien versus Predator Requiem from a fan's perspective is it's a disappointment. It took a beloved crossover concept and just delivered this really dark and messy, mean spirited film with these at times kind of unwatchable and forgettable characters. Uh, and it's a film that promised this R-rated thrill, but mostly delivered frustration, I think, and became this subsequent standalone film, um, almost like in a sense, but and it felt like the death of of the franchise, um, for the Predator, at least, and the Alien for a long time, um, until we got Predators in 2010, and then later the Predator from 2017, 2018, whenever it was that came out, um, and then Prey, and then and all of the prequels to the Alien films. So thankfully, it didn't kill those franchises, but uh, it did send the Alien versus Predator crossover concept to the graveyard, at least for the time being, until possibly Badlands. I guess, like again, I've mentioned that many times, but I guess we'll find out. But but guys, I guess that's it for this video. Sorry again for the delay. I know I was supposed to have done this last night. But I have just not been feeling well. I was feeling a little bit better, so I was able to do this today. But again, I still feel like I'm coming down with some kind of cold or something. I don't know. Maybe I need to go to the doctor, see what's going on with me. But just appreciate all you guys that have are here live in the chat, checking this out. Um, or if you're watching this on replay, I appreciate you guys for checking this video out as well. Um, just it means a lot to me, more than for you just to listen to me ramble about these films that I watch. Um, and just drop me a comment below if what your favorite of the Predator franchise is. Is it any of these films that I talked about tonight? Is it is it the one film that I didn't talk about? Um, I mean, like I said, it's an okay film, but I'm just not something I really want to watch again. And honestly, I had to force myself to watch Alien versus Predator Requiem again this time. And, like I just felt like if I was going to watch the first one, I'll watch the second one too. But I think it'll probably be a while before I ever watch it again. But yeah, just if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos, um, like this one. And I got something really cool. If you like Arnold Schwarzenegger films, because I did cover the Predator and for this video. Um, so next week, well, actually starting this this Saturday, so 2 days from now, I'm going to be doing like a week to week and a half of this whole series. I'm going to be doing of Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. So basically, I'm going to do like 5 different videos over the next week and a half. 4 movies each covered on each video, and I'm gonna serve them like rounds. And when it's all said and done, at the end of it all, um, I'm going to kind of decide, who wins between Schwarzenegger and Stallone, what movies I liked better from each respective actor. So we'll see how that tallies up at the end of all that, in the coming week. Um, But also, before I go, click that bell for any kind of future notifications as well. But with all that said, I'm Crater. This is Crater Mania. I love you guys and have a good night.